Five Nights at Freddy's, a game known for its lore, meme, and overall cringy fan base. But this game represents something bigger, something deeper. And today I'm going to talk about this video and what it's done for video games in general. So in video game studies, there's been a long-standing debate about what really matters more, the gameplay itself or the story behind it. This is the story about a simple indie horror game with basic game mechanics and implied lore, sparked a cultural shift in gaming and pushing the importance of narrative to the forefront. And you know, even if you've never played Five Nights at Freddy's, or as I'll be referring it to, FNAF from now on, watching this video could be really valuable. I'm going to be talking about how us as consumers think about media, and not just how we consume it, but how we shape it in return. Okay, what is FNAF, or Five Nights at Freddy's? Released on August 8th, 2014, by solo developer Scott Coffin, FNAF was marketed as a simple horror survival game. You play as a nighttime security guard, checking cameras, shutting doors, basically trying not to get killed by haunted animatronics. I know, it's a little weird. At first glance, this first game is all gameplay. No deep dialogue, no big cutscenes, not a really clear story, just kind of a hidden implied plotline. Originally, this game kind of leaned more towards ludology. More on that term later. An article from the University of Oklahoma's Game Developer Association kind of described the horror ambiance and mechanics for this game best. It's a nightmare scenario. This scenario can be described by two ideas: the lack of information and the lack of action. At start of each night, you only have the phone guy to help you defend yourself against the looming animatronics, but he doesn't exactly give you all the details exactly how to survive, so the rest is up to trial and error for you. You know that shutting the doors equals defense from animatronics, but it's not that simple, as you have a limited amount of battery to get you through the night. So, wasting time shutting doors all night is not an option. This is a great way to make the player feel uncomfortable and nervous as they recognize a threat is coming. But without the ability to run and the lack of information and action, fear starts to settle in. So this game was mainly about ambiance and mechanics. It was the mechanics of this first game that made you feel so scared. It was the sounds of the animatronics coming near you. Like stated in the article, it was that lack of information that made it so terrifying in the first place. And that really intrigued players to this game. But what happened next changed everything. Before we dive in, let's quickly talk about some terms. I've already used terms like ludology and narrative related to narratology, so I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into what those mean exactly. Robert Valoya from San Jose State University defines these terms as the following. First being ludology. Ludology is a discussion which focuses more on the mechanical aspects of video games, which argues for games to be understood through their unique interactive nature. Narratology is an approach that views video games as narratives similar to films and books. Now, this debate isn't necessarily picking a winner, narratology versus ludology, which one is better, but more understanding how different games and their audiences prioritize different experiences. Like I said before, the first FNAF game didn't really give any story, but more so hints of a deeper story being there. There were newspaper clippings, cryptic audio from phone guy, and shadows in the background. The lore was very implied, but it was just enough to spark fans' curiosity. So, the consumers, the players, started digging, and theories started flying everywhere. Who was this purple guy? What is the bite of 87? Why are the animatronics even haunted in the first place? And what's with the handprint on Freddy? And who's Golden Freddy? The first FNAF game was not designed as a narrative-heavy game. It's obvious, but the fan response turned it into one. That shift from ludology to narratology was driven entirely how people chose to interact with the game. The fandom exploded on the internet, specifically on websites like Reddit and, more importantly, YouTube. YouTubers like MatPat from Game Theory, Dawko, 8-Bit Gaming, and later on, YouTubers like FNAF and all of those guys built careers about untangling FNAF's hidden lore. Fan-made timelines, animations, and theories filled forums and subreddits. Everybody was talking about it and discussing the most tiniest details, like how many toes and fingers are on each animatronic. and even going into the game's code to find different file names and piece puzzles together. The most important thing here is lore. But why is lore so important? According to an article by The Antelope, the reason lore is so important is because it shows games don't need to be about playing. It can be complex in why it existed and allows communities to be brought closer together in talking about the lore. Basically saying, it's community building, and FNAF has a huge community. This lore is the reason why this game has lasted so long and has had such great commercial success. In an interview with New York Times, Quinn Quimby, who is a longtime FNAF fan and a contributor to FNAF Insider, he explained that the reason it's been able to stay so popular for so long is because it still has those theories going on all the time. The theories are ever changing, ever evolving, and ever building upon themselves. The lore became the game, and fans wanted more. And so Scott Cawthon didn't really have a choice but to deliver. The next games that followed embedded more mini-games, cutscenes, cryptic messages, clues. The lore was no longer just like a little afterthought to spice up the game. It became the design focus. In the following and later games, the shift from ludology to narratology became very obvious. Even though there were still really cool and innovative game mechanics, the focus on these game mechanics kind of took a back seat for the narrative of the story. For later games like Help Wanted, Security Breach, and Ruin, you can definitely see that the style of gameplay has shifted towards one that is easier for storytelling and hiding lore to be discovered. You have around with. You can walk around the whole building instead of being confined to one room. It almost feels like a completely different game franchise now. Originally, one of the most important elements of the game were jump scares, and that sinking feeling of panic, being stuck to one room. It's completely different now. The horror aspect of the game has also maybe even taken a bit of a backseat to the lore. And this is very prevalent in games like Security Breach, and even Ruin. It's not that scary anymore. FNAF was no longer just a game, it was a mystery box. Pun intended. A narrative puzzle scattered across different games, books, game code, website, the coding within the websites, pictures. But if you really take a step back and look at the whole franchise, it's pretty obvious Scott Cawthon didn't intentionally set out to create such a sprawling and narrative universe. But audience obsession drove the evolution of the franchise, and in turn, turned the game into a transmedia storytelling phenomenon. And this shift reflects a way larger media trend, and that's the fact that we're no longer passive consumers. If anything, we're co-creators. And you can see this mentality of us controlling what we want to see in the media, even in movies. For example, the whole Sonic movie debacle. The animation team in that movie completely reanimated Sonic from scratch just because the consumers said that they didn't like it. They wanted something different. Hey, and maybe I'm reaching, but to me that seems like a direct correlation. That sort of fan attitude seems to have stemmed from the FNAF community. Nowadays on YouTube and Reddit, we dissect, we debate, remix, reshape the media that we love. And FNAF is a case study in this. You can even look at all of the fan games that have been made and all of the games that have been made after. But as a whole, the community dictated the direction of the series by showing that narrative mattered more. As Harry Jenkins describes in Convergence Culture, fans now co-create the meaning of media through interaction, theory, and collaboration. So what just started as a game you play is now a whole community driven by not the developer, but the audience. To conclude myself, Five Nights at Freddy's began as a simple mechanics-focused video game with hinted, subtly implied lore as kind of an afterthought. But thanks to its fanbase, it evolved into a collaborative narrative community. And this kind of proves that audience can reshape media. The FNAF franchise shows that games are no longer just about how we play, but how we digest, metabolize, and conversate about them. And not just that, but how we contribute to the game ourselves, how we help aid the storytelling. And with games that came out like Bendy and the Ink Machine, Poppy Playtime, Hello Neighbor, and all of the ARG games that came after Five Nights at Freddy's, you can really see the influence on how us as consumers direct the market and direct the future of video games as a whole. And even though Scott Cawthon did a great job with the game, I really feel that it was the community that made it that way. This group of fans could have chose any game really with any sort of potential hidden lore to blow up like this. It just so happened that this game came at the right place at the right time and had the right kind of creator to run with it. So I want you to leave this video thinking about the things that you consume and the subcultures and communities that you participate within those things that you consume. Because if us as consumers and gamers can drive a video game market in a certain direction, we can do pretty much with anything with any kind of media in pop culture. This power that we have can help push social change in popular media in general. Asking for things like diversity in your favorite TV shows and games and stories make a huge difference. Choosing to participate with companies that have certain moral values or do certain things can drive other companies to follow suit. We, the people, have all of the power. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how much money you have. It's how many people you can get behind you to ask for a certain thing. So I want you to leave this video thinking about that. What are the things that you want to see in your favorite video games? If you get enough people behind you asking for it, I'm sure it'll happen. And Five Nights at Freddy's is the perfect example of that. And that concludes my video. Thank you guys so much for watching and analyzing my favorite video game with me. Here is the works cited of all the papers and articles that I discussed today. Bye!